Lobsta Productions.
I end up becoming 100% lucid during some instances, as lucid as I am right now talking to you. And I start realizing these are not dreams at all. Like, you could never convince me that they were dreams. And so I started out just seeing that they were creating, they were doing something strange with kids, and I met a hybrid child that was sat on my lap and like, this is mine, but not mine. It was just kind of super weird. It took me a very long time to, number one, even accept what was happening to me and kind of wrap my mind around it. And then I somehow, and you asked me, was it culture? Was it just coming from them? I think it was probably both. I think, this is a telepathic environment. Everything is just known. So it was just known to me that these were space brothers and that, they were creating a hybrid race. Now, the outside culture told me, at least what I was then being exposed to, because at first I had no exposure to this stuff. I was not into any UFOs. Everything that had happened to me my whole life was I would put in the supernatural, paranormal side. A lot of shadow people, Hat Man, that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until this period in my life when I was a little older, quite a bit older, and started becoming lucid during my encounters, many of my encounters, that I even realized that shadow people were transporting me to this crazy abduction phenomenon. So that's a whole other thing. So when I did kind of start investigating it, just kind of putting my toe into the water, what's happening, I was very much down that road. The Elizabeth, April, ascension, these creatures are here to upgrade our consciousness. That's kind of what was coming probably from the culture as well. So it was probably from both sides if I had to think about it. I went from being a very, very strict Christian to suddenly being open to new age ideas, buying crystals, talking to people who had spirit guides, funneling me down this road that I was a star seed, that it was me and my husband's job to spread, the news to the world. There was some really wild stuff going on.
We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers.
We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
Oh yeah, dude. There's some Nephilim shit.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight and be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and won't awaken to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up. Welcome to the end of days.
Everybody is slaves, only some are aware that the government releasing poison in the air.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Nephilim Death Squad. I am David Lee Corbo, a.k.a. The Raven. That is Top Lobsta, the father of disinformation. Before we get into today's guest, I would just like to remind all of our live viewers that this is a 30-minute preview only. Sometime around the 30-minute mark, we'll be going live exclusively to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad, where you can continue enjoying this episode, engaging with the live chat, gaining early access to the episode for the general public, as well as an ad-free experience. And you could do that all for free. Sign up for the 7-day free trial and absorb as much content as you can, and then get out before the billing cycle kicks in. But you're going to want to stay because we got a lot of content on patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. You simply can't get through it in 7 days, so it's not going to happen. But you can try, and I invite you to. That's patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Joining us today is Fringe. There she is. Boom. That was perfect timing. Fringe, for the audience who may not be familiar with you, let them know a little bit about what it is you focus on and where they can find you.
Hey guys. First, I'm just excited to be here because I love the name of your podcast, the Nephilim Death Squad. As soon as I saw the name, I knew I had to do it. Yeah, so I go by Fringe. You can find me on Twitter at fringe.com. And I'm just like a regular person who lives a regular life, who also happens to be an alien abductee. It sounds extraordinary and even ludicrous, but here I am.
Fringe, X keeps doing this thing where it unfollows me from you. This is the third time that I followed you since I've been aware of you, at least. it's I feel like it's disrespectful. You're like, you must keep getting a notification. This guy keeps following you and unfollowing you. I don't know what's going on. You're
It
saying
sounds
something
like
they don't want us to hear.
sounds like she's over the target then. It's not really that outlandish of a thing, especially on our show, to say that you are somebody who's experienced the abductee phenomenon. My own grandmother, probably very much how I got into this, was an abductee victim. She didn't know for a long time, not until she read the book Communion by Whitley Strieber. And, sufficient to say that that really screwed her up. She was not too pumped about that. Um, I wish in very many ways my grandmother was still alive to see the way that the culture has evolved and how this discussion is now being had in a very public way. And it's not this thing. I think she was not embarrassed, but lost. You know what I mean? It's a jarring experience from what I understand, and I'm sure you much better than I. So she didn't have a lot of resources. She didn't have a lot of places to go to have that discussion. Here in 2025, you've got quite a substantial following, and you're getting this information out, and you're having discussions with people who are both part of the phenomenon and outside of the phenomenon. And so it's really exciting to watch this narrative develop. Where do you want to start this story, Fringe? Because I personally, I'd love to hear your experiences.
Yeah, I'll start wherever you guys want to start. As a matter of fact, I hope you guys maybe have some good questions, because I kind of feel like I'm just telling the same story over and over, and I'm not really getting anywhere. I don't normally even focus on my own specific incidents that I've been through. A lot of times I gloss over those. But let's see, I just, a lot of times I just open up by saying exactly what I've already said. I'm just a normal person. I'm 56 years old. I've been married for 27 years to the same man, which is extraordinary these days. We both were in law enforcement for many years. My husband did 30 years. I did almost 20 years. So we're just regular, everyday people. When I'm retired now, so I just get up in the morning whenever I want, every day Saturday. I live a pretty great life. I have a great family. I'm just a regular person. But at the same time, I find myself getting snatched out of my bed at night, which is pretty awkward and can be very frightening. And just like with your grandmother, when I was, I want to say I was maybe 17, 18, 19 years old when that book came out, or at least when that book was available to me. That book was something I picked up. I believe it was probably at the library. That was my habit at the time. I picked up that book, and I remember not even being able to touch the cover and not even wanting to look at that cover. And I would actually turn it face down on my nightstand in my bedroom because I didn't want to look at it. And I remember not even wanting to touch the book. It was super creepy. And I don't even think I actually read the book. I think I kind of flipped through it and then just kind of let it sit there and ended up returning it. But you guys probably would not be surprised the number of people that book affected. That book affected at least thousands of abductees, and there was just something visceral about it. Now, the grays I see these days don't even really look like the gray on the cover of that book, but there's just something about it that struck a lot of people, and me included. And many abductees can remember the moment that they saw that book.
I don't want to necessarily get into too much of your own personal thing, just because I'm sure it's something that, like you said at the top of the show, you're rehashing constantly. And on this show, we have a pretty good idea of what that phenomenon looks like. I've had something similar. So the crossover is tremendous when it comes to the sleep paralysis phenomenon, and people will experience a litany of things in that state of sleep paralysis, all the way from alien grays or tall skinny grays to what they feel is a demonic presence, or maybe even specifically a hat man. And there's kind of everything in between too, but those are some of the more common instances. Yeah, that's that visage on the cover of Communion, and not really a far cry from Aleister Crowley's image of Lamb.
I was going to say that.
And when you look at that image of Lamb, it's an interesting image because he's got these little slit eyes, which isn't typical of an alien gray. But above his eyes, you can see there's the shading for what looks like would be tremendous eyes. It's almost like that image of Lamb is squinting, and that he would have tremendous eyelids that would flap open, and you would see the rest of his eyes. So we've all heard that story. Does that story resemble yours, Fringe? This is still something that's ongoing too, right?
This is something that's ongoing. Are we talking about, oh, we got Lamb up there now.
Mm.
So yeah, it's something that's ongoing. It's something I deal with regularly. And there is a difference between that liminal state or the astral dreamscape, which we're all in pretty much every night, right? We deal with oddities and entities and who knows what else. Our dreams could even be, processing our subconscious mind for the day. We could be dealing with some random karma in there. Who knows what's happening in our regular dreams? Once you get into that astral dreamscape, you start encountering some crazy stuff. The alien abduction phenomenon is actually kind of over and above that. So these are actual metaphysical creatures that come and take us out of our beds at night, physically in many cases, not always, but in many cases, and actually transport us out of our environment. So we're no longer there in the bed sleeping, or even in the astral dreamscape many times, although they can take your astral body out of your body as well. So it is slightly different. It is a different environment. So where a lot of us are dealing with that in between, that weird sleep paralysis thing where you get paralyzed and then next thing you know, you're who knows where. You might see some entities. I've seen Hat Man a couple of times. I've ended up in some black maze with Hat Man. So I would call that the astral dreamscape. You could talk to someone like Vicky Joy, if you've ever had her on your podcast. She's phenomenal for that weird in-between state where you have these entities approaching and looking for contracts and consent. And, they'll appear, even if you hear Vicky or even someone like Heidi Hollis, they'll appear in your dream as your sister to get you to open the door, because they're always looking for some weird consent and such.
We've had Vicky Joy Anderson on this show. I've also had her on my other show, and I talked to Heidi Hollis, who believes she has a good handle on what the Hat Man is specifically. And, it's like in a lot of this, just so you have a 1,000-foot overview sort of our show here, Fringe, these concepts and these happenings, this phenomenon is something that we and the fan base are very familiar with. So don't feel too compelled to have to unpack some of the, I wouldn't call them simpler aspects of what's happening, but some of the more commonly known aspects of what's happening. I would be interested, Fringe, in a couple of things. How long has this been happening? And then what are you making of it? Because we have the sort of generally accepted idea of what the alien phenomenon is. And I do think it's a watered down, reductive version. I think that this phenomenon is much more complex, but I am not an experiencer. You are. And so I think it's important, Fringe, after all this time, however long that is, what have you surmised from this? What do you think is actually happening?
Well, it's easy for me to go back now in hindsight and tell you what I think it is. The journey to get there, hell and back. But as I sit here before you today, I think the actual aliens are modern day Nephilim. That's what I think they are. And I didn't arrive there lightly. So I started out believing these were space brothers, like ETs, outer space type thing. That's where I started. And that's not where I'm at anymore. And that was quite a journey. I didn't just assume, well, I did assume, I assumed they were aliens from outer space. And then my own journey, it was very spiritual, which is strange for aliens from outer space, right? What do aliens from outer space have to do with any spirituality? I mean, that's something you can unpack there. But today, the more I think about it and piece everything together from my own experiences, I think they're modern day Nephilim. I think these are metaphysical beings. I think Genesis 6 has never stopped. I think they're still doing it today. People have a really hard time wrapping their minds around that. People look at especially biblical scripture and they think, oh, that happened. I was one of those people. Oh, that happened thousands of years ago. That's not happening anymore. But here I am, and that's where I'm at. It was a long journey to get there, but that's where I'm at today. I think these creatures are hybrid creatures. I think they're actually probably created for the very purpose of abductions. for what they're doing right now, what they're carrying out right now. They're single-mindedly focused on creating a hybrid race. We could ask, what's that hybrid race going to do? We could maybe even argue about that. People have different ideas, but if you look at the entirety of the abduction research, every researcher will agree that they're creating a hybrid race. So what's the purpose for that? So that's what I think they are. But please understand, I didn't start there. I thought they were space brothers. I thought they were aliens, ETs from outer space. I was on that Elizabeth April, they're coming to upgrade our consciousness. At first, I didn't even quite know what was going on. And then it took me a while to figure it out. It took me a while to wrap my mind around my own experiences. But that's where I was. And once I realized that that was not the case at all, I went through an entire, nightmare, spiritual crisis type stuff.
Can we start there? Oh, go ahead, Top. Sorry.
I kind of want to jump the gun here. We've been doing our own research, and we came to that conclusion probably, I don't know, a year ago on this show. Just putting together stuff between Gary Wayne, L.A. Marzulli, like the standard Nephilim thought leaders, and we were like, yeah, these guys are definitely demons. But then we started to piece together some current events, and I'll ask you a question. Have you heard of the telepathy tapes?
I have. I've heard of the telepathy tapes, so I have a bit of background on them, but I haven't watched them.
Okay, we've done like 2 deep dives, and we've been talking about it. It's a subject that we just keep bringing up, and it seems like it's like a concerted effort between the government and spiritual entities that are, I guess if we're talking about hybrid humans, would you call these kids hybrid humans in a way, David?
I don't know if I would call them hybrid children, but there's an overlap, in my opinion, between the children of the telepathy tapes and the black-eyed children. So Karen Wilkinson is a great example of somebody who's also an abductee. I suppose survivor is the term, because not everybody does. And she was impregnated and then mysteriously lost his pregnancy, and then years later was subjected to another abduction experience where she came into contact with these children. And the overlap, I would say, is nonverbal telepathic communication, and that theme pops its head up a lot. And where Top is going with this, and I think this will resonate with you, Fringe, is
it's a bear with us, because it's taboo, right? We're talking about children that are disabled, and in my opinion have been trapped inside of their body purposefully by an agenda, by a very dark agenda, which we've kind of we've maybe uncovered over like 6 or 7 hours of interviews here. But go ahead, David, finish up.
So these children have something in common with the abductee victims, and also have a lot in common with various occultic channelers throughout history. And that commonality is that they're receiving messages. And the messages are very close to what you were talking about, Fringe, this kind of like Space Brothers thing, but more specifically, that there is a coming calamity that we have to avoid in one shape or another. And that calamity has much to do with the climate. And so there are characters in that sort of occult, esoteric, even a large crossover into the scientific community. One who we've been talking about quite a bit is Andrej Puharich. And he ended up being in contact with what he called the Nine. And the Nine turned out to be 9 entities that ruled over Egypt. And they also had a message for Puharich, and that message was one of a coming calamity that mankind had to avoid. And then on the other side of that calamity, spiritual ascension, which is a narrative that continually comes up. Not only do we have to avoid the calamity, but we also have to ascend in some way, shape, or form spiritually. What I want to ask you, Fringe, is about
tell her the through line there. This guy, Andrej Puharich, he's channeling these entities, the 9, but that's not all he's doing. He's like a government contractor, a spook at the highest level, and he's writing books about telepathy. He even pops up in the telepathy tapes when you listen to it. It's like episode 3. They just it's a brief overview. It's like, oh, by the way, this doctor was doing he was creating technology for a tooth implant that was basically voice to skull technology at the time. Anyway, And then they go on to correlate how these children are communicating with each other at long distances, and how possibly it's like similar to radio waves. But this guy was working specifically on telepathy. He was also doing other inventions. And one of the ways he was working through the telepathy was through chemicals. He came out of Edgewood Arsenal, which was known for doing chemical testing on the army there, on the soldiers there. They were testing like high doses of LSD, high doses of THC, you name it, even poisons. This guy comes out and just starts running experiments from the 50s to the late 70s, which is where we get Project MKO. That's like 1953. You get a slew of things. Everything is created right around 1950 when this guy is released on the general public. Now here we are 70 years later, and we're dealing with autism rates through the roof. I mean, like 1,000% times like back what they would be back then. And now we're released, the telepathy tapes are released, and we're dealing with this phenomenon of nonverbal autistic children communicating telepathically, visiting this realm that they call the hill, in which they can all go to and communicate with each other. So they're in the astral. They even say, like, the kids come home, they run, they'll put their head under a blanket. Some of them will go in water and kind of float there, block off their senses. They're depriving their senses in order to communicate in this place. And they're also it's lightly touched that, yeah, they're communicating with entities. Some of them are communicating with their ancestors or the spirits of their ancestors. Others are communicating with just, I don't know, what they think might be gods or God itself.
But then they come back with this message of a coming calamity, and
it's always the same thing. It's always the same thing. But it's just a fascinating study, and I think that the lady Kai Dickens, she's ill-equipped to handle it, or maybe she is equipped to handle it and present it in this manner, because the manner that we're supposed to, the way we're supposed to perceive these tapes is that we need to ascend. We are not developed. We are not evolved to our full form. Therefore, but I think that the narrative is a little bit more malicious than it's being put on.
And just to give you the sort of the final thing on this that we suspect is going on, it's like Puharaj was working with people who were having dental implants, and these dental implants were picking up frequencies. And that's like an old trope. We saw it kind of hashed out in like Looney Tunes and a bunch of other cartoons. People get braces and suddenly they're picking up music. And Lucille Ball actually thwarted like a Japanese insurgency that was planning to attack us somehow. She picked up their communications on a dental filling. So what I realized is that putting metal in the teeth gives you access to certain frequencies. But what if there was a different way? What if it didn't have to be an invasive surgery? What if you could get everybody on, like, let's say, a schedule and inoculate them with heavy metals, which settle in the brain, especially nanoparticles? They cross the blood-brain barrier, and that's where all of it settles. And then what? You're doing two things. You're making us susceptible to receiving frequencies, but you're also causing irreparable damage to these children. And because of that damage, meaning they can't function in their own body, these nonverbal autistic children, they begin to disassociate, which is at the core of the MK program and the Montauk Project. Seemingly, the disassociation is how these children, or how anybody, gains access to these other realms. So in that way, we're getting this narrative right now where autism, because of the telepathic aspect, might be the next stage in human development. It's something that a lot of people are saying, but I can't see it that way, because to me, this is birthed out of based mind control is what MK operates on. And when you induce that, it creates a dissociative identity disorder. And I would argue the exact same thing has happened to these children, and it's what's given them access to these realms, right? So that overlap is very concerning to me. But I want to go to this thing, Fringe, and you're welcome to give your thoughts on that. But at some point, can we expand a little bit on why you had that narrative in the beginning, that they're sort of space brothers, right? Which is very common. Was it something that you came to on your own terms? Was it something that the culture kind of implanted, and so that was your starting point? Or was it something that they imparted on you?
Well, for me, I think I just started out, I was trying to figure out what they were even doing.
Mm.
So it was very clear. So this is before I had any exposure to the abduction research. I was just a person who was writing down my dreams. And I started going, whoa, some crazy stuff happening in these dreams. I started becoming more and more lucid during the dream state and kind of wrapping my mind around different things. So when I first encountered what they were doing, it was very much related to what I would now call, the hybrid breeding program. There was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of doctor visits, meeting children, a lot of stuff to do with my hormones, which is super weird. Like super weird stuff is happening. And I don't know what's that?
In the dreams?
Yeah, well, yes, it started out as dreams.
Mm.
So I started writing down my dreams. I was 50 some odd years old, and I just started writing down my dreams. That's a long story that we don't even need to get into. And as I was writing down my dreams, I started becoming more and more lucid during my dreams. It's actually pretty common. If you want to write down your dreams, you're actually just kind of hooking up your right and left brains. You're accessing your subconscious. Anytime we're writing or doing something creative, painting, anything like that, you're actually kind of integrating your brain. And so it sounds kind of weird maybe, but that's how it started. I've always kind of been a lucid dreamer. I've always gone out of body my whole life since childhood. But the minute I started writing down my dreams, I started going, whoa, what's happening? And just that act of writing down my dreams made me more lucid during the time that I thought was dreams. The short story is I end up becoming 100% lucid during some instances, as lucid as I am right now talking to you. And I start realizing these are not dreams at all. Like you could never convince me that they were dreams. And so I started out just seeing that they were creating, they were doing something strange with kids. And I met a hybrid child that was sat on my lap and like, this is mine, but not mine. It was just kind of super weird. It took me a very long time to, number one, even accept what was happening to me and kind of wrap my mind around it. And then I somehow, and you asked me, was it culture? Was it just coming from them? I think it was probably both. I think, this is a telepathic environment. Everything is just known. So it was just known to me that these were space brothers and that, they were creating a hybrid race. Now, the outside culture told me, at least what I was then being exposed to, because at first I had no exposure to this stuff. I was not into any UFOs. Everything that had happened to me my whole life was I would put in the supernatural, paranormal side. A lot of shadow people, Hat Man, that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until this period in my life when I was a little older, quite a bit older, and started becoming lucid during my encounters, many of my encounters, that I even realized that shadow people were transporting me to this crazy abduction phenomenon. So that's a whole other thing. So when I did kind of start investigating it, just kind of putting my toe into the water, what's happening, I was very much down that road. The Elizabeth, April, ascension, these creatures are here to upgrade our consciousness. That's kind of what was coming probably from the culture as well. So it was probably from both sides if I had to think about it. I went from being a very, very strict Christian to suddenly being open to new age ideas, buying crystals, talking to people who had spirit guides, funneling me down this road that I was a star seed, that it was me and my husband's job to spread, the news to the world. There was some really wild stuff going on. But and I bought it for a long time. I thought, okay, these creatures are here to send us to the 5D. It sounds similar to Christianity. It's kind of a similar, type thing. It was sounding familiar to me. So, I was doing energy work. I was doing all kinds of different new age type activities. So I was getting now immersed in this stuff. I was getting all the downloads, all the stuff that you guys are talking about. I've never channeled an entity voluntarily, but I was getting stuff just plopped into my head, just big packages of knowledge just getting dropped into my head. And I was I don't think I was ever hook, line, and sinker, but I was going down that road. Like, okay, I understand. And then it's just been a couple of years ago now that I started realizing that they were not telling me the truth, that the entities themselves in this environment where everything is known, it turned out I was also getting other downloads that were kind of trying to counteract this narrative. Now, was this now the positive side or the God or angel side of the phenomenon? I don't know. But I end up in their environment and now things are being known. And I realize that they're lying, that they're not telling me the truth, that everything they wanted me to know was not true. I realized that they were transferring my soul. All kinds of crazy stuff is happening. And now I start questioning this narrative. Now I have a psychic telling me that her spirit guides want me to know, that I need to go spread the love and light to the universe and we're going to ascend and all this kind of stuff. And now I start going, okay, I'm not buying it. And I start questioning the narrative. And so I'm now questioning the narrative during the abduction scenarios and in real life, like just walking down the street, right? So it's coming from both sides. When I started pushing back and questioning that narrative, that's when all hell broke loose. And that's when I went through a massive spiritual crisis. I had never heard of anybody like Michael Heiser or Gary Wayne or Chuck Missler. I had never had any exposure to anything that could explain whatever this was that was happening to me. I had to go through this whole massive spiritual crisis. I did it by myself. Like I had to learn these lessons all by myself. I hadn't heard of, people who had kind of already put the pieces together. I had no pieces to put together. And so was it the culture? Was it them? I think it was both. It was coming from both sides. And then once I started questioning it, I was like, these are not space brothers at all. That's when I started actually getting severely punished. And I say I was kicked up the food chain because that's when I started seeing the more demonic entities and all that kind of stuff started. So
Well,
it was
Fringe,
coming from
before
both sides.
we
Very long answer to your question.
well, I mean, it's a fantastic answer because it fits so well with what we suspect is going on. But I don't want to jump to any conclusions. Can you tell us a little bit about the messages that you were receiving and their nature? And I know you've talked a little bit about that, but how then were the messages that you were receiving from what might be perceived as benign entities, good entities? How were they not meshing together? How are they in opposition?
And how I don't know if you could even answer this, but how would they be able to lie to you if you're in this state of gnosis, like telepathy, where everyone's kind of knowing everything? Were you able to figure out like how they were able to guard something from you where you wouldn't be able to guard anything from them, correct?
Well, I mean, that opens up a whole other can of worms. So during this period, I was actually getting tested in these environments. So I was actually being tested for controlling my own thoughts and masking my own thoughts against them for their own purposes. And that gets kind of weird. But so what they do is everything is known, but everything is known what they want you to know. They absolutely can mask at least some of their thoughts and their intentions from us, 100%. But I think I ended up in that environment so much that I started realizing that not all was as it seemed. And also when they were testing me and I was having to learn how to control my own thoughts or to think of something else so that they couldn't read my mind. And a lot of that testing was on hybrids. I was being tested against hybrids. Like, could I control my own thoughts? Could I mask is a better word. Could I mask my own thoughts to kind of get by a hybrid? So that was happening a lot. So I was kind of being tested in that environment. And then the more lucid I was becoming and the more of my own self I had available to me in these instances, because they turn you into a zombie. They put you in zombie mode. You're not, most people I see are not even in their right mind. They have no idea what's even going on.
Like, can you control your body, or do you just mean like your mental state?
Mental state. And so they very frequently want to keep your body under your own control. They're asking you to, they're not asking with words, but it's known. I have to walk down this hallway. It's known that I have to get up on this bed. It's known that I'm going to get this test. Half the tests that it is known that they're giving me, it's not even true. It's not real. I don't even know, the ultimate purpose for some of it. So to answer your question, I think things were just starting to leak through. I was just starting to notice they're lying to me. I'm not getting XYZ test. It's very, very difficult to put into words. It's all just experience and kind of just being in that environment.
Well, it sounds like,
And
Fringe, that you maintain some level of discernment, and that really the problem is it's an amazing experience, and we don't have any sort of reference point for it. And Christianity, in so many ways, as far as the organized church goes, does not have the tools or the answers for this phenomenon. And so through that amazement, it's like your discernment still works, but you see something that you are led to believe doesn't exist, and your critical thinking skills they take a backseat to just taking that information in.
High level con men.
yeah, I could see that. So where was your question?
Well, I was saying, what were the messages that they were conveying to you
Okay.
that were so important to
Yeah.
spread, and how did the counter information, in what way did it counter it?
So the messages I was getting coming from the outside. So I end up this is I don't know if I've told the story. Me and my husband just randomly walk into a crystal shop. I was actually kind of called into the shop. And again, how many times I'm going to say it? I know it sounds bizarre. So we go into this crystal shop. A lady walks up to us, and she is just like magnetized to us from across the shop. She starts telling us all kinds of stuff, like stuff about past lives and past lives in Egypt, that my husband has the power of Potiphar, that we have had many lives together, and her spirit guides start talking to her and telling her all kinds of stuff. So I am being funneled down this road of, and there's no other way to say it other than being a starseed. She told us, your purpose is to spread this message. And she kind of starts pumping us full of this Elizabeth April stuff. There's this guy named Shakara, some guy. And she starts sending us stuff, and she wants to work with us. And it just gets really weird. So some of the messages are coming from outside. Some of them are coming from her spirit guides and from outside. Now, the messages I was getting that were just being downloaded into my brain, they were different. They were things like I was getting messages on energy. I was getting lessons on how to time travel. I got a lesson on how demons feed. So I would have to open up my journal and kind of go through and say, what were these lessons I was learning? But what was happening was I was laying down at night and getting into that liminal state, mind awake, body asleep type state. And it was almost immediate. I would get a geometric shape. And I have them all kind of drawn, not all of them, but I have them drawn somewhere. And the shape would kind of take over my mind. And then that shape, I would call it people call them downloads, but it was like a Dropbox of information. And the information would just be Dropboxed into my head. And in those moments, I would know all the secrets of the universe. But by the time I woke up in the morning or I went to write it down, even sometimes that night, that would kind of disappear. And I would just be left with the general knowledge that was coming through. And so that was happening. But what was also happening was I was getting, again, for lack of a better word, downloads. I was getting downloads on Christ. I was getting downloads on how the big picture works. I was getting downloads on what are these creatures? How do they fit in? What is this? Like random stuff. And I have, some stuff written down where I would lay down and immediately sit back up because something had just got dropped into my mind about Jesus. And I start writing all that stuff in my journal. So now here's the thing. I look at all of that stuff in the same way. I don't know where that was coming from. I don't know if those are good entities. I don't know if those are negative entities. I don't know the agenda of these messages that were coming through. I mean, I was just looking through my journal today because I was coming on your guys' show. This wasn't a download. So this happened more in that astral dreamscape. I was approached by a tall, blonde male entity. It was telepathic, so it wasn't human. And it was one of those things where it presented itself to me and I challenged it immediately because by this time I'm calling BS on all of my experiences. I'm like, you are not what you're pretending you are. And I'm just calling it right now. And sure enough, most of the time they would actually devolve into I think their true state. I don't have a way of knowing that for sure. So this entity presents itself and I put out my BS meter to it. And this is just a telepathic exchange. And it approaches me and tells me, and these are not words, it's just now known, that Christ is coming back. It's kind of he's coming back come hell or high water, and y'all better be ready type of a message. So that's something that happened. So I could look at that and say, okay, could this be a nefarious entity trying to lead me down a wrong road? Maybe, but the message doesn't seem like it, right? That seems like that would be the good side of the phenomenon of what we would call it in ufology. Christians could say that was maybe an angel. I mean, I have no idea what that entity was. And so all of these things are kind of happening at once, and it's back to back to back. I went, I don't even know, a couple of years without any breaks. Like this stuff was coming at me every single night, or at least most nights a week. I was getting bombarded by both sides. So I'm getting that message that, these are just our space brothers from outer space and you need to go spread the word. And by the way, they're doing the abductions and the hybrids. That's for our own good, right?
Yeah.
I'm getting that on one side. And on the other side, I'm starting to see through it and question it. And that's when I realized that they were all, once I started getting punished for questioning the narrative is when all of the curtains, were dropped and they weren't even pretending anymore.
So Fringe, it sounds almost like well, you certainly ended up in a bit of a tug of war, and I don't want to use past tense because you said that this is still a phenomenon that's occurring to this day, but the proliferation or the frequency of this happening almost suggests a sense of urgency. And that's just what I'm picking up. Maybe it's because I see things through the lens that I have, but we just had the second ever congressional hearing on the UFO phenomenon. And it's very clear that the government is gearing up to do something. I don't know what they're doing, but I have a feeling that it's going to include highly advanced space homies from another galaxy that have a vested interest in us not destroying ourselves in nuclear war.
Are you saying we're on the verge of a golden age, David? Is that where you're getting at here?
Well, that's the thing is, I don't know how aware you are of this, Fringe, but within the occult worlds, there are characters that are, pretty famous. And characters like Alice Bailey or Helena Blavatsky, these occultists predicted long ago that the year 2025 would be the coming of a golden age, which is a terminology we see getting thrown around today by the Trump administration. And that I think it's Baba Vanga, who is a clairvoyant. She's long since passed, but she was kind of a little babushka lady, with like a grandma, iconic grandma figure from, I don't know, Bavaria, some very obscure place. But either way, she was a world famous psychic who predicted a number of things successfully, including her own death, the death of Princess Diana, 9/11, and a couple of other big events. But she also determined that in 2025, we would have encounters with aliens. And so a lot of things are pointing to 2025, which probably flavors my opinion that I've come to, where it seems that there's a sense of urgency. Did you ever feel like that was the case?
So I feel that now. So I now have a sense of urgency to counteract the narrative that's out there. So just like you come across, most abductees come across, or many, I mean, the percentage is pretty high, of abductees who believe that they're trying to get the message out there that, you know, we're all going to send to 5D. We have to be ready for the cataclysm and all this. By the way, I've had cataclysmic dreams my whole life. I've seen that wave that comes and supposedly hits, you know, the East Coast.
Oh my God, I've had the same dream. And
That's
Top
why-
has had the same dream.
That's
my
the
mom
dream.
was too. My mom
Turned my
said it.
mother into like an evangelical Christian. The dream of the wave. It's
Mhm.
insane.
By
Everyone.
By the way, I've since moved to Florida since all those years ago where I had that dream. That dream notably took place while I was in Florida. I
Wow.
remember that, and I remember surviving it somehow miraculously. I held onto a street lamp, which makes no sense.
You can't swim. Don't lie.
You can't swim. No, you can't swim. Don't do that to the people. They know you can't swim. So that cataclysm dream, can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that does play into this bigger picture. We're doing a kind of a unraveling of a narrative.
Wait, David, we're also giving this away for free.
Oh,
This is
that's
free.
right. Yeah, people are watching and they shouldn't be watching. Guys, we are now
No.
at the
They're
45-minute mark.
watching. Look at this is what they're watching right here.
They're watching the hair. Yeah, there's hair. It's happened. She has better hair than Top. I agree. Guys, we are now at the 45-minute mark. And unfortunately, if you'd like to continue enjoying this conversation and being part of the live chat and enjoying an ad-free experience, then you've got to go to patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. You can sign up there for free and you continue watching this episode live at patreon.com/Nephilim Death Squad. Sign up for the $7 free, or I'm sorry, the 7-day free trial. And get out before the billing cycle kicks in. It's fine. You can do
There's
that.
another way. You can also find a certain somebody on here, and you can finish for free also over there too. So, you know, your choice, dealer's choice. Go ahead and follow Fringe at on Twitter, and we'll see you guys on the other side. So let's continue.
Otherwise, bye-bye. So
wait, I got to go back. So you asked me about the urgency, and then
Yeah.
I have the cataclysm, right? So the urgency for me, so most abductees have the urgency. There is an urgency. It feels like a monkey on your back. But my urgency, and it was really bad last year. Number one, the urgency is to get ready for the apocalypse.
Right.
And I've had that since I was about 15 years old. But number two, my urgency is to get the message out that these creatures are not our friends. That the aliens, and I'll keep it, you know, narrowly focused. The so-called aliens snatching us out of our beds at night, creating the hybrid race, they are not our friends.
Right.
And we need to stop making excuses for them. We need to stop inviting them in. We need to stop, you know, doing things like CE5 to call them in for dinner. So that's where my urgency is, which is interesting because most abductees are on the other side. I'd say it's even upwards of 85% of abductees eventually will embrace their abductions. And if the surveys say that they wouldn't even change it. I am not that person. I would stop it tomorrow if I could. Well, yes. I mean, you could definitely apply that. And so my urgency is on the other side to get the word out. You need to stop doing CE5, which is what our government wants us to do right now, which is insane. And there's a whole campaign right now for everybody to go out and to call the aliens in from outer space. So that's my
telepathically, by the way, right?
Telepathically, yes. So that's my urgency, which is the opposite of most abductees. Most abductees want, you know, their urgency is to warn that we're damaging the environment and that you got to be ready for ascension, and that their space brothers are friends. On the cataclysmic side, so when I was 15 years old, I had a shared dream with a friend of mine. Now, we were both very young, and we had some very interesting things happening to us during that period. We had played with a Ouija board, and we had some wild stuff happening. As a matter of fact, I hit her up maybe a couple of months ago and just reached out to her and said, "Hey, do you remember?" And she said, not only did she remember, she reminded me of some other stuff that had been happening during that time. So me and my friend have a shared dream about the pole shift, like the apocalypse is coming. And this started when I was very young, and I've just always had it in my awareness that the apocalypse is coming, like Christ is coming back in my lifetime. And look, I said this before, every generation kind of thinks that same way, right? The end of the world is coming, you know, so that's, you know, not necessarily unusual. And I've always had these cataclysmic dreams. One of them is the wave dream. It's not very, it's not a whole lot to talk about. Most of the time I'm in a very tall high rise in New York City. And a mile-high wave comes for the city. It's very much like the scene in, is that Independence Day? I
It's
don't remember.
the day after tomorrow.
Day After Tomorrow? Okay. But I've seen a picture of it. I even put it in my blog, I think, because I
Yeah.
saw a picture. I was like, that's it.
I've
The
had
wave is
my
so
dream
high.
also took place in a city.
Okay, so it's mind-blowing. But
Mhm.
I'm in a building, and I've actually had somebody analyze this dream, and apparently, because of where I am in the dream, and I don't get killed in the dream, like, I'm not hanging on to a light post like you mentioned.
Mhm.
The wave just comes, and it doesn't get to me. Um, but I've had variations of that dream in other places too. I've had just the mega quake dreams.
Mhm.
One of those was in Las Vegas. Another one I was in San Diego. But planes falling out of the sky, bridges collapsing, any calamity you could possibly imagine. I've been having these dreams for my whole life. Now, I didn't realize that almost all abductees have had these same dreams.
Mhm.
And the abduction research actually shows people who have been regressed, which, by the way, I've never had a regression to remember any of my abduction encounters. But most abductees have had regression. And the regression shows that they're actually sitting abductees down in front of a screen and
Mhm.
they're playing these cataclysmic events. And what
MKO.
Absolutely. And what they're doing is they're trying to get the buy-in. They're trying to tell the abductee, this is what's coming, and this is going to be your fault. By the way, it's our fault. Like we
Mhm.
control the sun, right? Because
Yeah.
the sun's going to micronova and we're going to have a pole shift that is completely out of our control. This is coming. It's your fault. But don't worry, we're going to save you from it. And all you have to do is kind of embrace us and be on our team. So
Mhm.
it's a propaganda videos that they're showing during abductions. Is this the same thing I experienced? I don't know. I experienced it as dreams, as cataclysmic dreams that I've been having for the dream started when I was very, very young. And then the pole shift thing started when I was about 15. Like the
Mm.
pole shift is coming. Well, so there's an urgency. If the pole shift is coming, there's an urgency. Like right now, I'm building a bunker.
Mm.
So that's the urgency, to be ready, be prepared, have
Mhm.
everything you can have. I have a little tiny prepper community on my Twitter feed. It's mostly just for fun, but there's that urgency when it comes to that as well. Like
You
something's coming. I've heard it audibly. Be ready. Like
right.
something's coming. Be ready.
There's
You
two
you
things here. David, we just interviewed somebody, this guy, Citizen D,
Mhm.
and he's a person that's been doing crop circles. So he claims that the crop circles that we see, at least most of them, are man-made. But the interesting part of this is that they are, for lack of better words, they're downloads. Like
Mhm.
the people who craft these circles are getting downloads of what shapes to make in what specific field and when to do it.
Mhm.
And I asked him toward the end of the episode, I said, well, why now? Because he's been retired from it for like 15 years. I said, why are you coming out now? Why the urgency now? And he expressed the same thing. He was like, something about this, it's like, it's got to get out now. But I think he's working on the other side of it, in my opinion, because I was a little tricky. I showed him I showed him a picture of the lesser keys of Solomon. I was like, do you recognize any of these shapes? And he was like, oh yeah, make that one on the right there. I was like, oh, okay, that's like a sigil for a demon, and they just have you like putting that in a cornfield somewhere. I was like, that's kind of crazy. But yeah, the urgency is there and it's being pushed from
Mhm.
every single side. It's
And
wild.
Fringe, you've stepped in this thing. That's why there was such this dramatic reaction from Top and I when you said pole
Bullshit.
shift, because that is the conclusion that we came to. The Iliad we told you about, warning about the cataclysm, UFO abductees, getting this download about this cataclysm, even the telepathy, nonverbal autistic children, same exact thing.
Yep.
And then I found the connective tissue in a huge way, in everybody's favorite autist, self-proclaimed autist, who wants to put a chip in your brain, who just trademarked the terms telepathy and telekinesis for that chip that he's going to put in your brain. Elon Musk. There's a video that we've shown on this show several times now. He is in an interview with some podcasters who are otherwise unaware of what he's really saying, but he's just expressing his concern that the Earth goes through these cycles, yada yada yada, and then he lets slip that even the poles have shifted position. And if that sort of thing were to happen again, the moon wouldn't even be far enough. You'd have to go to Mars. So everybody knows that Elon Musk is obsessed with going to Mars, but nobody knows that that's why, because he's worried about a coming polar shift. And so that was, and I don't know what to,
Elon is
where to
also
place that.
obsessed with like, you know, designer babies and IVF, which is
Yes.
another rabbit hole, but I don't think it's for
Well,
this
that's not,
episode.
it's not another, it's the same rabbit hole, the hybridization
It is.
program. And so what I don't know, which is, you know, one of many, many things that I don't know, is the polar shift real? And if it is, then are they trying to avoid the tribulation?
Okay. I think it is real. And so it's only been the last 2 or 3 years. So maybe I'm just making this up. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I had a huge monkey on my back. Like, you have got to be ready. And it got really weird because my husband actually joined me in this. So he was actually feeling the urgency as well, where we actually sold a couple of high value items and went and got every single thing you could possibly imagine for our current circumstances, to be prepared and to be prepped and ready for any kind of cataclysm, anything that could happen. But it's only been the last couple years that my paranoia about the pole shift
Mhm.
started actually getting out there. And that's just for my own awareness. It's probably been out there longer than that. But even the story, the Adam and Eve story with the CIA stuff. Did you guys watch the Y files on the Adam and Eve story?
I've heard about it, but
Oh
no real
man.
knowledge on it.
Well, when I saw that, I just went, "You're kidding me." So the pole shift is actually real. This is maybe going to happen. You now have, I mean, there are people, we had a Sun weatherman, Ben Davidson, in a space. Have you guys ever talked to that guy? If you
Yeah,
want to hear about the pole shift, bring that
he
guy
reached
on.
out to me and he thought that I was somebody else, much to my dismay. So that's about as
Oh,
far as that
that's
went.
sad.
He thought I was Paul Stobbs. He DM'd us actually on our, and he said, is this Paul Stobbs show? And then he said, no, it's not. My bad. I said, it's
You
okay.
know, if you're persistent with him, you'll get him. I mean, we got him in a space on Twitter. He did a space. And so when I started realizing, wait a minute, there's actual science out there to support the pole shift. And I'm not the brain to pick when it comes to that, but someone like Ben Davidson is for sure. There's actual science out there right now showing that we are probably in the middle of an electromagnetic excursion as we speak.
They're no
That's
longer
when it
synced.
got really weird.
Yeah, geographical north and magnetic north are no longer synced as of right now. They are
This
off.
year, the amount of
Yeah.
planes that have just crashed or like just went haywire. It's, I mean, The Rock, his plane almost just crashed just today or yesterday or something. So this is like,
Well,
something's going on.
I saw this incredibly compelling theory that the movie Leave the World Behind was not about a terrorist attack, but if you pay attention to the strange details, it's actually about a polar shift.
The
And the
pole,
reason,
yeah, planes
the,
falling out of the sky.
exactly, the animals behaving oddly, suddenly walking up, like the deer are walking up to the children. And so it seems that they take advantage of it in some way, shape, or form. There's like a nuke that's dropped at one point. But if you pay attention to the film, there's little cues in the background and some of the dialogue and then some of those strange happenings like the plane nosediving and such and the animals behaving that suggests this is actually about a polar shift.
Yeah. So imagine my surprise when I start coming across the actual science now confirming something that I've been waiting for since I was 15. So I think it is real. How it plays out, I don't know. I mean, we could just look at the scriptures and see that something terrible is going to happen somewhere in the book of Revelation. Now, some people take that book and say, you know, some things might have already happened. Some things might be happening in the future, maybe a little bit of both, but there's some cataclysm happening in that book. So for me, I think it's very real. I don't think so I think they're using something real as propaganda. And that's generally what they do. So these so-called space brother aliens, a lot of times, you know, they don't just flat out lie. They're using truth and mixing in with their lies. Like if you're talking to a counterintelligence agent, they're not going to just feed you a spoonful of lies. They actually feed you a lot of truth. And then, you know, you've got that 20% lie that serves their agenda. And it's much easier to swallow that way. I think human beings can generally recognize a flat out lie, but they have a harder time recognizing something that's wrapped in truth. So I think that there is something to it. I don't know if it will happen in our lifetimes or not, but I think there's now evidence out there to support it happening in the past. and it's probably going to happen in the future. I think that, I mean, just look at our own government. I mean, we've got tons of, underground military bases, and we have people even in ufology with golden tickets in case of the cataclysm hits. So I think it's real. But I think it's also being used as propaganda.
Mhm. Yeah, we often say we use a euphemism. The chat knows it's 9 truths and 1 lie, right? They tell you a litany of truth, and then once they gain your trust, and you find this narrative palatable, that's when they feed you that 1 lie. And so that's something that we see a lot, which begins to cause a little bit of a problem when it comes to sort of the New Age movement, or Gnostic principles and things like that, or let's say like practices like numerology, or things of that nature, astrology. It's
Even
like,
crystals, right? Like,
well, even the crystals, yeah, it's like they didn't make those things. They inverted them. These seem to be principles that are, I don't know, ways to describe the realm that we inhabit, right? Like numerology, the fact that there does seem to be some recurring uh number coincidences, I guess you would call them. And the elites do seem to manipulate those numbers. They do things on a specific date and a specific, geolocation, and there's all these numbers encoded. Right. And so I think that there's even a lot of truth in those things. It's just a matter of how it's been. Where's the inversion? Where's the lie? And I don't know if we are equipped nowadays to parse out that lie, just because we've been stripped so much of our spiritual understanding. But
or if we like, a question that we ask often is like, should we even be looking into these things, or not necessarily looking into them, but like, the ability to astral project or be lucid in your dreams is something that's innate to every human being if you want to do it. And the question is like, are we supposed to? I'm not sure. Are we supposed to just stay here and keep our head down? Because there's a lot of stuff going on out there that we should probably be aware of. There's going to be a lot of lies that we need to know. But the more you look into this stuff, the more it looks back at you, and
yeah,
that can get a little dangerous.
right. Are we not meant to notice? I don't know. Um,
Yeah, I say that a lot. I don't think we are meant for these things in this life. I really don't. When it comes to all the New Age stuff that I ended up getting into, there's a lot of truth in what the New Agers tell us. There's a lot of truth, in human beings probably being antennas, and in energy, and in manifestation, and all these New Age principles. But is that really what we're supposed to be doing? Because anytime we're engaging in any of these New Age practices, it turns into some kind of contact modality, and you end up with some kind of entity attachment. And there's probably a reason we're not supposed to be doing those things. This whole idea of we need to upgrade our consciousness and we need to ascend, into the 5D. Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think I'm actually supposed to stay right here in my physical body without dissociating and without, trying to send myself to some other realm. And actually, maybe I'm just supposed to master the physical realm. I'm here in the physical realm for a reason. I'm in a physical body for a reason.
right.
Maybe I need to master this before thinking about, trying to master or dive into other realms. That's how I think about it. I think there's a reason that we, as a Christian myself, I think there's a reason we are encouraged and perhaps even forbidden from engaging in these contact modalities, because it's not safe. That's my personal opinion on all of it.
It seems like these things this sort of knowledge was really meant for the angels and not for us. We're here engaging in this physical realm. This realm is for us, and we're supposed to, I guess, just operate within the bounds and restrictions that have been created for us. But then, these entities come along and they provide us something a little bit different. It seems right now that there's this real merger of technology and the spiritual realm. It really always has been, but I think sort of the apex of it might be what's on the horizon. Like, I saw that trials are officially beginning for Neuralink volunteers. There's actually a post from the official Neuralink page here on X today. And when I look at that, that technology and its spiritual implications are huge, especially that it's coming from Elon Musk and what we just laid out about him. But it seems that that's always been the MO. That's something that Top and I discuss here on this show often, is that when you look at ancient cultures and their developments, they're often attributed to some sort of deity. And those developments are rudimentary at first. It's like metallurgy and agriculture, right? And that's how they get to stand on their feet. But it seems like these entities have been playing an incredibly long game, where they had to get us sufficiently advanced by teaching us these things, and ideally get us to the point where we can interact with them, or maybe even bridge the gap, maybe even free them. I don't know, by way of technology.
Well,
And
they have to tell you also. Like if you ask, they have to tell, but it's also there's this weird form of consent. So back to Andrija Puharich, he was doing his work in the 50s to the 70s, and then in 77 you have Project Stargate or Operation Stargate, which was a DIA program where they were doing remote viewing on Russia during the Cold War, but really what they were doing was contacting aliens or channeling entities. Now Donald Trump comes in, and all of a sudden we have a $500 billion bill that's going to fund AI, and it's going to be called Operation or Project Stargate. Same name. And in my opinion, it's the same thing. It's just instead of using, in the 70s, the channelers were using things like Ouija boards or even sex magic practices to do these summonings and rituals. Now we're using ChatGPT, and it's kind of the same exact thing but more technological. It feels like they're closer to their end game of whatever they're getting at, getting this inside of your head, inside of your body to take over your spirit, soul, or what are the three we have? With body, spirit, soul, right?
I think it's almost like a consent thing, right? It's like they don't have rights over us. We could grant them rights, and we often do unwittingly, but ultimately, through the name of Jesus Christ, they can be casted out. They don't have any rights over us.
Has that worked for you, Fringe?
It has never worked for me. And I've been to deliverance. So I think that there are a lot of cases in the abduction research where that has worked, but there are also many cases where it hasn't. And I look at these so-called aliens as an intermediary between the spiritual realm and the physical realm. They're very physical. You might as well look at them as human traffickers. Could you pray human away? Perhaps. The will of God be done. Has it ever happened? Has anyone ever prayed human away or for it to stop? And so I think that there are many reasons why it might not work, which I understand now. I didn't understand it at the time. So yeah, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But just remember, these are physical creatures we're dealing with. They might be metaphysical, but they're physical creatures. And so sometimes I say it like this. If you are a female college student and you've just left a bar and you've had a couple of drinks, you decide to take a shortcut home to your dorm, you walk behind the alley and 5 men come out and grab you. And they do not have good intentions. I know we're going to be on YouTube, so I'm not going to go too far. They do not have good intentions. And that woman, that female, she starts praying and it doesn't stop. And it actually happens, and she's victimized, right? What do we say about that? Those were physical human beings attacking her. Well, these creatures are very, very much the same. Now, there is a whole realm of creatures out there. There's a whole bunch of different creatures in the unseen realm. But when it comes to alien abduction specifically, they're very physical. They're coming for your physical body 9 times out of 10. Well, I shouldn't say that. Even if it's half the time that it's physical and half the time they're just abducting the astral body. Imagine a prayer stopping that. Also, I did Tony's show. My first podcast I ever did was Tony Merkel on the confessionals. There was a point where he looked right at me and he said, what about that story in Daniel where he prayed for 21 days before there was any intervention? And so I look at both of those things, and I like to just throw that into my answer. So it has never stopped things happening to me. However,
I'm beginning to suspect, to finish my line of thought before, I wonder if putting an implant in your brain, it seems difficult for spiritual entities to have rights over individuals, not without going through a whole litany of potential consents in some instances. But what then if you put something foreign in the body and they have rights over that foreign object? If it's technology that they can inhabit, and then that technology is inside of you, does it bypass that somehow? The other thing is, I've been looking at the Greys. I've become comfortable with this idea that they're a sort of a biomechanical thing. They don't have reproductive organs. They don't seem to have any emotional range. They seem like automatons, like drones. And Karen Wilkinson describes them as being left in a pile when she has one of her recollections of an abduction scenario. She said they were like discarded, like when they're not in use, they're just kind of piled up and they smell bad. And so, as comfortable as I am with that idea that these are sort of an interface, if you will. Maybe they can be possessed or inhabited temporarily. They do a job. These spiritual entities are in a non-physical realm, but maybe by way of the Greys, they can interact with this physical realm to whatever means or ends. But then the question is, well, who created them? And it makes me wonder if, like everything else, we were commissioned to create them.
Right.
Yeah, and that now you're getting into a whole other rabbit hole, right? So, but I think it's both. So I think that these are modern day Nephilim, for lack of a better term. I think the spiritual entities, same ones came down, mated with humans in Genesis 6, the same ones that started giving us technology and trying to convince us we were God. They're doing the same exact thing today, right? They're trying to convince us all that we're actually God, or God experiencing himself, or whatever take they have. I think that they, at least the ancient ones, at least the mantids, have been created by them. But and there's some evidence in the abduction research that the Greys actually have human DNA, or part human fetus perhaps. But I think we're also creating them too. I think so humans and these NHI beings are working side by side in these underground bases. I think we're also creating creatures like the Greys. I have come across Greys who have some emotion. They are flat, but they're not emotionless. But I've seen the abduction research saying that they're just hanging up like a coat, so there's that too. And there might be different types of Greys, but I'm with you on the possibility that we're also creating them. I mean, so much of what they do is through us.
Right.
They're using human beings to accomplish their agenda.
Well, that's something that is espoused a lot within this Christian conspiracy community, is that they cannot create, which is why they inspire, right? So throughout history, we've been inspired, endless times. Some of the most famous people and their works of arts will attribute the inspiration to that work of art, or for that work of art, to some sort of download or some sort of, something that was outside. Certainly on this show, I would say my own personal experience is one of, I'm not a tenacious researcher. I don't have all the answers and information, but seemingly ideas, narratives, and connections fall into my lap to the point where I can't even attribute them to myself at all. Stephen King, I believe he attributes his works to coming to him in dreams, in states of inebriation, when he would fall asleep because he was a big drug user, which of course the drugs play a massive role in this. It's funny because I've experienced mushrooms before, and there is this softened version of the very same narrative that I received, which is we're all connected and we're going to ascend in some way, shape, or form. And very much, by the way, that information was coming to me in just full stop. It was coming to me. It was not things that I was thinking on my own. These were things that I was getting impressions and information. And so that theme, it just seems to permeate all these experiences, from the alien one to the, what people perceive as spiritual, to what happens in drug use. And I want to ask you, I know that it's pretty clear your answer to this question that I'm about to ask, but I hope that you can elaborate a little bit. We spoke to somebody on this show, and I forget his name, but he said that this phenomenon is not physical. It's a spiritual one masquerading as a physical one, which in some ways I do agree with, but there's massive physical implications. And when I asked him about this phenomenon where women will be impregnated, and then they'll lose their pregnancy, and they'll attribute it to the baby being removed from them. And they'll have all kinds of things, like the doctor will say, yeah, you're definitely pregnant. And then weeks later or months later, when they go back, the doctor will say, it appears as if you were never pregnant, which baffles them. But he said that it's not out of the realm of possibilities for the human body or the female body to actually absorb the fetus, which is, I really don't know. I'm not a medical practitioner, but can you speak to just your interpretations on the physicality of this situation? Is it a reality? Is it only the grays that are physical? When you are being removed, is it your spirit that's being removed? Do you ever get the sensation that it's actually your physical body in a different place?
Are the cryptid? You said something about like cryptids or shadow people being
Shadow
these like
people, yeah.
the mediums, the transporters. Are they physical? Are they spiritual? Yeah. What do you think?
Okay, so a couple of things. So first, you said they can't create, and
Mm.
I would beg to differ because they did create in Genesis 6. They created physical hybrid beings with humans, and that's what I think they're still doing. So I think the mantids are running the show as far as the abductions go. That doesn't mean that they're running the entirety of the unseen realm, but they're running the abduction show. I believe that they are hybridized beings. So they are fantastic at doing the science. They're fantastic at getting a human egg and putting it into a petri dish and scrambling it up with whatever they want and then putting it back in. So that's how they're creating. So can they create out of whole cloth? Maybe not. I would say no. And in fact, they have a very difficult time reproducing on their own, which is why they need us. So just to that point. When it comes to, is it physical, is it not physical? So most Christians, and even a lot of the scientists who are investigating this phenomenon, believe that this is not a physical phenomenon. They think it's all spiritual. It's all happening in the spiritual realm. They're only taking perhaps our astral body with the consciousness and, messing with us in that way. I believe that that is happening. But there's too much in the abduction research that points toward an actual physical phenomenon. They are creating physical hybrid beings. They are making people. I think it's ultimately going to be the soul trap that you talked about earlier when you were referring to this telepathy tapes. They're creating physical creatures. We have in the abduction research, and some of these have happened to me. If you wake up with your pants on backwards or inside out, I have woken up with grass in my bed. There's always one story I tell, because to me, I was in those shoes for quite some time. I was wondering, is this only happening in my mind? Is it only spiritual? Are they only taking my astral body? Because I can feel it when they do it half the time, at least. I did have an instance where there was a while where I was sleeping with a camera in my room, and it wasn't the best camera. I now know that I should have had a better camera, but I was sleeping with a camera in my room. I was terrified to the point where I was sleeping in a helmet made of Velostat. And by this time, I think I had probably not by this time. At some point, I even covered that helmet with a Faraday material, because I, at this point, had an understanding that they were using technology to access me. This is not just spiritual. So the spiritual
Did that
realm,
work, by the way, the Faraday?
it kind of worked temporarily. They're very technological. They're technologically advanced. This is not just the spiritual realm. They have technology in the spiritual realm. The technology that they're sharing with humans, that's coming from somewhere. It's coming from them. Okay, so there was an instance, and I'm going to just tell two very quick stories. I'm not sure we have a little bit of time left. So on this particular night, I had put on a helmet, and by this time I had something like 16 layers or something of this Velostat material on a helmet. I wore it religiously to sleep every single night, and I had a scarf that I would put over the helmet. It was actually more of a baklava type thing. And this thing had an emblem on it. And I would put it on exactly the same way every single night. I would put the scarf on and I would go to bed. But at this point, I was a mess. It was like I was in Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger, horrible things were happening. And so I go to bed, and I get a notice from my camera that the Wi-Fi has gone out. And I think, oh crap, what could possibly happen? The Wi-Fi's gone out. That's not good. But I have the helmet on and I just say, okay, I'm going to go to bed anyway. I think that the Wi-Fi went out at something like midnight, and the Wi-Fi was out for 3.5 hours. Now, during the night, I had the perception of being trapped in a portal. Like my consciousness was potentially uploaded into it's almost like being uploaded into a computer screen. Yes, I know how crazy that sounds, but I come to find out later that that's something that they actually do. And so that happens during the night. I wake up in the morning and I immediately know something's wrong. And I look, and my helmet, my scarf that was keeping my helmet on my body, the emblem is in the wrong place. And I also have a bloody nose. And so could that have been just some type of astral interference or non-physical? Perhaps. But the fact that the Wi-Fi went out and my scarf was now backwards, I mean, maybe I have DID. Okay, maybe. And that I had a bloody nose. So those are the three things that made me think this was probably more of a physical interaction. I'm going to very briefly tell you about a gal I consider her a friend at this point. She's another abductee. She went through a lot of research to figure this out for herself. And without getting too graphic, she ended up using a material that is used in a assault kit to stain her body parts to find out if this was actually happening physically or only in the spiritual realm. And that evidence has now been shown to someone who's making a documentary. So I think it is physical. And I think if you look at the abduction research, people will start out believing that it's not physical. But you have people who are locked out of their houses. Again, you get grass in your bed, you have dirt in your bed. People come back to their houses with someone else's clothing. So I think that a lot of it is physical. And I think if we have any evidence at all, the evidence actually supports that at least some of this is physical. I will say, however, that there are times when I don't even know, because it is so real and so physical, but yet I felt them take my astral body out of my body. And it's my perception that my physical body did not leave the environment. So there are abductees who believe everything is physical. There's a researcher, David Jacobs, if you're familiar with him. He thought everything was physical. And I think it's somewhere in between. So I think a lot of, especially Christians, will try to say, no, this is just this is a spiritual attack. You gave them permission. You must not have had enough faith in Jesus, get right with God, that kind of thing. There's that side of it where they think everything's happening in the spiritual realm. And then there's people who think it's only physical. And I think it's somewhere in between. And I think there's some mystery there that we probably can't even wrap our minds around yet. Ultimately, I think it's physics that we don't quite understand yet.
I would agree with that. I think that there's some things that are just beyond us in this state that we're in.
There's an interesting thing about the telepathy tapes. Spoiler alert! At the end, one of the kids ends up dying. Actually, throughout throughout the time she was taping it, and he dies in a bathtub or like a hot tub. He just drowns. So when you're talking about this idea of like the spirituality versus the physicality, I think it could be. You're definitely right. It's probably both. I'm not going to go and speculate that this guy, there was foul play or whatever, but he was traversing this realm. They had pretty good evidence that he's talking to people in France telepathically on this thing that he called the hill. But what else are you doing if you're in this other realm? Like, where else can you be wandering? And also, you don't know what's going on that other side there. Like, we're naive. We think we could just go there and like walk through and everything's okay. I don't know, man. I think the more you walk through, you might get a visitor, and it's just a strange one. It didn't sit right with me. With me.
Fringe, you said something before. We've touched on this idea of like a soul trap or something like that, and there's a lot of that in different belief systems. There are people who believe that the moon is actually some sort of it's meant to harvest souls, and that actually is what the game Pac-Man is birthed out of, which is Pac-Man is the moon and he's eating ghosts. And then of course you have the idea of like reincarnation, like a reincarnation trap, which like I'm not I'm not so quick to say that reincarnation doesn't exist. I'm more quick to say I don't think that we can just say souls are being recycled in their entirety from one physical form to the next, because so many people experience like being Cleopatra or something like that, and it's like maybe there's something else going on where we can access the experiences of somebody who lived previously, or something like that. But along with the reincarnation narrative does go this idea of a trap, that we're being trapped in some sort of a cycle. And then of course within the alien abduction narrative, there is a lot of talk like that this stealing of souls almost. And um I mean, could you elaborate on that a little bit? What gives you that impression that you know that births the phrase soul trap?
So some of this was just being in their environment and getting these weird downloads. So number one, have you guys heard of Ted Rice? So he was an abductee. He's kind of an old, he's an old timer, and he worked with Carla Turner. So Ted Rice has seen the aliens put like almost like a headphone device on abductees, and they're basically downloading the narrative of past lives. And so is that the entirety of what's happening? No. But I think that a lot of people believe that they're in a past life, because of channeling and because of doing this QHHT type past life regression stuff. I think a lot of it is very similar to abductions. It's very similar. When you start looking at things like near-death experiences and the reincarnation and the past life stuff, it's very similar to what's happening to abductees. In the near-death research, there are several cases that kind of make, because I never believed in reincarnation, and then I did. There are cases where you have kids who are coming up with stuff that they just couldn't make up. They're drawing a picture of their past life and the school they went to and their parents and, some newspaper article and all this kind of stuff. So you have that side of it. But at the same time, you have kids who believe that they lived the same exact life. Like you could have 3 kids who believed that this is not what they believed, but they believed they were Cleopatra, right? They lived the same exact life. Okay, so how do we explain that? So at this point, I'm not convinced one way or the other on reincarnation. I think it is a possibility. I think it's a possibility for at least some people. What I am convinced of is at least half of it is nonsense from the actual aliens. I mean, when you have someone like Ted Rice who has seen them planting past life memories into people, how do you trust any of it at that point? So when it comes to the soul trap, you mentioned AI, you mentioned technology, but I think it's coming from both sides. So I think they're also coming at us from this hybrid side. And so whether reincarnation is real or not, our souls are coming from somewhere, and they're coming into these physical bodies. And just what they were doing with me, it's so complicated to explain, but I knew before coming across any of the abduction research, I knew, it was known, that they were trying to reverse engineer the human soul. And if they couldn't reverse engineer it, they were going to tie it up or trap it and try to keep it for themselves. I don't understand the entirety of how they're going to do it, but that was made known to me. So what I think they're doing is I think that they have very carefully created these hybrids that are just enough human to actually house a human soul. But if you have any contact with these hybrids, you very quickly understand that at least most of them are sociopathic. They have no concept. They're not even actually allowed to think about things like God. And they're very much still tied into that hive mind. You explained the Greys earlier as kind of the worker bee drone types. They're still tied into that system. And so imagine a creature that is part human, that could house a human soul, but this human soul is actually tied up into the negative alien agenda and this hive mind agenda. and their ability then to choose God, or to think, even to think that the thoughts are all controlled. You cannot have a thought in that environment, a stray thought, that it's not permitted. And so imagine that these hybrids, whether there are still hybrids being born on the ships, there's now some evidence to suggest that we have hybrids being born on Earth, just straight to human women, but they're hybrids. Somewhat to your point on the telepathy tapes, although I would never want to single any of those kids out as being hybrids for sure, because that could start a whole weird witch hunt thing, just like it could start with abductees. But just imagine these hybrids being tied into this hive-minded network and not being able to choose God, whether they're born here or born on the ships. To me, that's the ultimate soul trap. And I think that's what they're trying to do. I think that's what they're trying to accomplish. They're trying to take over the human race as we know it with their hybrids. And so imagine a human soul being born into that hybrid body and not being able to even think about God or choose God. They don't even have the inclination for it. So there is a researcher, and I can't remember his name, but he was, instead of doing a past life regression, he was doing a forward life regression on people. Every single one of them were born into a hybrid body, and all they were doing was working. And yeah, kind of creepy. So that's what I mean by the soul trap. And it could be happening on both sides, on both ends. I don't think it's just one single thing.
Well, yeah, why only try one method?
Right.
It reminds me in the book of Revelation where it says, men will want to die, but they'll be unable to. It's like it's something to do with this idea that you're fleshing out. That's where we're headed, or at least that's where they'd like us to head.
Well, they do trade. I'm sorry, they're known to trade longevity for loyalty. So there is going to be something to this. So most of our elites are looking for immortality.
Yes.
And there's going to be something to the AI, transhumanism component. It's going to merge with the negative alien agenda is transhumanism.
Yes.
And they're already doing it through their hybrids.
You said that there's technology in the spiritual realm. I think it's just worth noting that even Joe Rogan himself says that one of the phenomena he experiences when he does dimethyltryptamine, which he popularized in a massive way, is this gifting of really highly advanced technology that in the moment he can conceptualize, he can understand it. But he also knows that whatever this is so advanced, he can't bring it into this realm. And then, of course, when he comes down off the trip, he no longer remembers it. But we have only a few minutes, and I just want to ask you one final question, Fringe. Were you a part of the GATE program?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for Carmen. Carmen from the chat. They've been asking us, please ask this question. So
the answer to that is no. But my sister was in the GATE program. What I will say is I do have some type of MK component to my experiences. The reptilian creatures I encounter call me by a number. So, and being called by a number, unbeknownst to me, when I first came across this a couple of years ago, I've now put out so many feelers and talked to a lot of different people. At first, I couldn't come across any other experiencer or abductee being called by a number, but it's actually, I now understand it's actually a thing in the programs. You get assigned a number. So I was not in GATE, but yeah, I'm called by a number. 18. Number is 18. Yeah. And that also happens to be the day I was born. So there's also something. Have you guys talked to Penny Shepard?
No, Penny Shepard? Not familiar with her. So
Penny Shepard believes that she was number 11 in the Montauk Project. So I have some weird ties to Montauk. And so the creatures I see look like the Stranger Things monster. I've never seen the show, but
the thing with the flap head.
Well, so I end up seeing an advertisement for Stranger Things, and I just went, oh my gosh, this is the creature. These are the creatures I see. And it's that really weird reddish, pinkish skin that looks like it was burned. So Penny Shepard believes that she's number 11 from the Montauk Project. Now you have other people who claim this as well, right? And I think there's more. There could be more than one number 11 for the Montauk Project. So Penny Shepard that was also the day of her birth, is the 11th of the month. And so speaking with her, I got a whole lot of information from her that was very creepy. And I guess I'll just leave it at that. I mean, we're kind of running out of time, but yeah. So I'm called by the number 18, and these are reptilian creatures who look very, very similar to the Stranger Things creature. So there's some ties there. I don't know how it happened. I'm still trying to figure it out for myself.
Fringe, will you come back on the show?
Sure.
I'd very much be interested in having you back. It feels like this episode, in so many ways, was confirmation of this puzzle that we've been putting together here on Nephilim Death Squad, and especially the whole polar shift and virtually all of it. And it's refreshing to get it from somebody who, aren't just two idiots kind of theorizing.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what we're talking about. And well, I want to thank you for your time. And I was looking forward to this episode, and rightfully so. This has been fantastic. We're going to end up getting this out probably about a week from now. And I can't wait for everybody else to hear this, because even though Fringe, multiple times throughout this episode, while you were trying to say something, you would say, I know this sounds crazy. What you've done here is shown our audience that we're not crazy.
That you're not crazy. Or we're all crazy. Maybe we're all crazy.
2 years. See, like
it only took 2 years. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, unfortunately, we have to bring it in for landing. You're always welcome back. I really am already looking forward to the next time. But one more time, where can people find you, Fringe? Because this information is important.
Yeah, you can find me on X, exclusively on X Twitter at fringe.com. And I actually have a little link there on my profile to some of the other interviews I've done right there on YouTube, especially if it ends up on YouTube. The show will be linked there.
Oh, there's the Merkel episode. That was a banger. All the ones that you've been on with Tony Merkel, man. That's it's how we saw you. But man, what an incredible story. Thanks for spending the time with us. I feel every time we get a guest of this caliber that comes and tells us stuff, I'm like, man, they have no idea how much time they're wasting talking with us, but we appreciate it.
If you had 0 people watching right now, I would have joined just because of the name Nephilim Death Squad. You would have me right there. And if you ever get that actually going, please call me.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. This is
you're in. Yeah.
It's a placeholder until whatever happens. Yeah. Thank you, Fringe. This has been fantastic. And I think it's time to end this. Top, do we got anything else?
No. Until next time, don't forget to obey, submit, and comply with your alien gray overlords. We'll see you later.
The greatest hypnotist on planet Earth is a oblong box in the corner of the room. It is constantly telling us what to believe is real.
You can persuade them that what they see with their eyes is what there is to see.